This lecture is to go over an introduction to macromolecules, sometimes called biomolecules. For biology, they kind of assume that you have an underlying knowledge of chemistry. And this would be the chemistry of polymers or polymerization. And not all of you may have had that in chemistry yet. So this is just kind of a brief overview of how this works. But basically, there are 4 classes of macromolecules. They are carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Okay, 4 main kinds. So the macromolecule, we call it that because it's big, macro, instead of micro. So if you did have a chemistry class and you remember back to it, most of the equations that you were working with involved, maybe 10 or 15 atoms at the most. In basic chemistry, you do a lot where you're just looking at synthesis reactions or displacement reactions, things like that. But a macromolecule is huge. What you see here on the screen is a rendering of the backbone of a protein, but this isn't atom by atom. This is actually way zoomed out. So when you're looking at macromolecules, you may be talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of atoms. So you can't use the same kind of chemistry. Instead, we use biochemistry to be talking about these. Now, these macromolecules are made of very few atoms, but they're common on Earth. CHON, those are the 4 largest ones: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and they're listed in the order there of how common they are in living organisms. But arrangements of this carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen with a little sulfur and a little phosphorus thrown in, they're arranged in so many different ways that eventually builds the complexity of life. And how it achieves this is through these macromolecules. Yes, we often use computers to generate images such as this. So here's the 4 main kinds. Technically, lipids aren't a true polymer, but they are included in our macromolecules. Okay, so there's 2 main forms. We have monomers and polymers, and these are generic, but mono means one, poly means many. So the macromolecules are polymers, so they're many units, but they're built of monomers. So they have this simple unit that can build on itself and chain almost infinitely, it seems, to build much more complexity. So you could kind of think of it as a monomer as like a single Lego brick, and you can use single Lego bricks in many different arrangements and styles to make a larger, Lego brick creation, which would be equivalent to a polymer. Polymers and monomers, they go back and forth. So we have some processes in our body where we take monomers and we build them into polymers. You see this especially in prenatal development as a baby is being grown. It has to start from somewhere. And you also see the reverse, polymers being broken down into monomers. So an example of this would be the act of digestion. When you eat, you are eating polymers, and your digestive system breaks those polymers down into their monomers so that the monomers are small enough to be absorbed into your body and then can be used to recreate polymers to build your body. You literally are what you eat. Okay, but these 2 processes go back and forth. But water is needed. So to go one way, you have to add water, and to go the other way, you remove water. So first, when you take 2 monomers, 2 or more monomers, and you chemically bond them together, covalently bond them together to make a polymer, you actually get a water molecule out of that process. So this would be, you have 2 monomers that are added together, and then it yields 1 water molecule and 1 polymer molecule. So this is called dehydration synthesis, and it's also sometimes called condensation reactions. Dehydration means the water is coming out of it, and synthesis means you're building a larger molecule. Condensation is another term for it, and that has to do with pulling the water out of this molecule, but it's not the same thing as when you have condensation on your glass of, iced tea or something. That's a different process. But the water comes from removing this hydroxyl group from one molecule and a hydrogen from the other. These reactions are called anabolic. So when you go from a simple to a complex, that's an anabolic reaction. Anabolism is 1/2 of your body's metabolism. And you may have heard the word anabolic before because it's usually, you hear it in the popular press related to anabolic steroids. Those are steroids that people take illegally sometimes to build muscle mass. So that's why they're anabolic. They're building a more complex protein within the muscle cells. These do require energy. They're endergonic reactions, if you remember that from chemistry. And all of this is facilitated with the use of enzymes. We will get into enzymatics at a later date. Now, the opposite reaction is called hydrolysis. Hydro means water, and lysis means splitting or breaking. And we'll actually come across that suffix lysis quite a bit in this course. So for this one, water is a reactant. It is not a product. So you have to add the polymer and the water, and then the water gets split back into its hydroxide ion and its hydrogen. And those get added where the covalent bond was broken on that polymer. This is where you go from a complex molecule to a simple molecule, and these reactions are called catabolic. So your catabolism is the other half of your metabolism. So metabolism is the sum total of all of the chemical reactions within your body. Then it's made of your anabolism, which builds complex molecules, and your catabolism, which breaks down the complex molecules. Catabolic reactions release energy. They're exergonic. So the catabolic reactions, the best example, keep in your mind, is digestion. You have to keep your body energized, you have to put chemical energy in it every day in the form of food, and you catabolize that food to release the chemical energy so that you can stay alive. And enzymes are also required for this process as well. And we will have a later unit on digestion where we get into the specific digestive enzymes that are needed.